There are many secrets to successful family businesses. I think one of the most important ones is to realise that no two businesses are ever going to be the same. So if your friend down the road has a successful business, then running your business in the same way as theirs may not be appropriate for you and for your business. Family businesses are very complex animals because they bring into play both the commercial aspect, so actually what it is that you do, that you sell or you provide to your customers and clients, but also behind that, in terms of operations, is very much the family element, which brings a very personal dynamic into the business as well. That personal dynamic can be quite challenging because people tend to be around the board table tend to be that much more relaxed with each other, and therefore perhaps the filters that might be adopted in a non-family business around the boardroom or in the management team don't always exist. And certainly I've come across many businesses where it's well known that the family will have shouting matches at each other, not necessarily behind closed doors, but perhaps on the factory floor or in the main office, which isn't always appropriate as far as staff and indeed customers and clients are concerned. Successful family businesses are those businesses that manage to harness successfully the skills and aptitudes of each of the family members who are involved in the business. Not just the commercial side of the business, but actually also for the management and direction of the business. There are too many businesses out there where people inherit their position as a member of the board or the management team simply because of their family ranking. So perhaps they're the eldest son or the eldest daughter, so therefore they become the CEO, rather than necessarily utilising the skill set of the family member who is most appropriate to occupy that role. The successful businesses are those that manage the succession well, and that's not always easy. For family businesses, there is the dynamic of generational change. We're passing from father to son to grandson, perhaps. And there are all sorts of truisms around saying that, the first generation makes it, and by the third generation, there are very few businesses that still exist as family businesses. But I think it's about, at each stage of that cycle, looking at what's going to happen, planning for it. We know that people can't last forever and therefore can't last forever within a particular role. That happens in any business. So you need to be planning 10, 15 years out even as to what your succession plan is going to be. In planning for the generational shift in the management team, it's sometimes going to be the case that you actually haven't got a candidate within the family who will take over. You then may need to think about whether it's appropriate to bring somebody in externally, or whether actually you think about selling the business or indeed just stopping the business. Maybe the product or the service that you provide is no longer relevant in the current commercial world. And maybe it's better from the family's point of view to cash out at this particular moment rather than see their investment dribble away over the next generation. For many businesses, a great challenge, particularly for family businesses, is recognising when the resources you have within the business are insufficient, whether they're insufficient because you have particular challenges that you need to face that you don't have the experience or bandwidth to deal with, or whether because you just don't have sufficient resource within the family team to run the business effectively, perhaps taking into account changes in the marketplace, so on. The successful family business is the one that doesn't bury its head in the sand and pretend everything will just be all right because we've always been all right and we've got sufficient people within the family in order to run the business. But the successful business is the one who turns around and says, actually, we need to bring somebody in from outside the business, and embraces the concept of doing that. And that's really important too, because we have seen a number of circumstances where people invest very heavily in an external person coming in who's got perhaps great skill set, but then hamper them by not letting them actually do what it is that they want to do and what indeed you've brought them in to do. So that's a really important transition that has to be made in those sort of circumstances. A challenge that many family businesses find is where the boundary is between the boardroom and the family relationship. That's really difficult to manage because if you've just had a row with your brother or your sister outside the boardroom and then you come into the boardroom and you're trying to run the business, you have to have some sort of mechanism in order to cut that off. Otherwise, things can fester quite greatly, and certainly I've seen a number of family businesses that have failed simply because of very personal issues that the family haven't been able to put aside within the boardroom. When we talk of family businesses, there's often a sense that the family is the unit that is the whole business, if you like. But actually, the business team that run the business should be much wider than that. You have the family at the centre of it, perhaps, as shareholders and owners and participators. But actually, the team is much broader than that. It's the management team that assists the family in running the business on a day-to-day basis. But it's also, as part of the team, the advisors that sit outside, those observers of your business to whom you will refer key decisions and you will ask for their input. So that may be your lawyers, your accountants such as ourselves, your financial advisors who can take a part within the business and within the business team and form as much part of your team as individual family members do. One challenge for family businesses can be participation. Not everybody in the family, particularly as the business transfers from generation to generation, can be involved in the running of the business. And yet, from an inheritance point of view, they may well hold shares within the business. Is that right? Should they hold the same amount of shares as somebody who's actually helping to run the business? Are there other ways of incentivising the family members who are running the business as distinct from those who just hold shares and have held those for many generations? I'm currently advising a business where it's over 100 years old. Through the many generations, they've now got hundreds of shareholders, most of whom have nothing to do with the business. Should they receive the same amount of dividend or remuneration, shall we say, as a family member who's involved in the business? And those are issues that really need to be thought through, not just as the business passes from generation to generation, but also when the business is started up. The key recommendations I would make to any family business to ensure that you've got your succession planned well in advance. Who's going to take over the business? Who's going to surround the business with support and advice? It's to be brave with your business and the management of it, and to also be brave enough to say to family members, you're not the right person for the job, you're not the right person for the business. And finally, make sure that you've got a strong team who surround you in terms of advisors and supporters and advocates for the business. People who don't necessarily sit around the family kitchen table, but who will sit around the board and the management table.